that you're here with us today, and we say welcome. Let's go ahead and get started. To ensure success, we'd like to just set a few norms. Please remember to mute your mic. There might be times where we mute everyone's mic, but once we ask you to jump in with a question, if you're in your breakout rooms, please make sure you unmute and share. Because we have such a large number, we're up to 96 participants, might you consider using earbuds or headphones to minimize background noise? We love to see the little faces and our furry friends in our screens, but to minimize those background noises, we invite you to use headphones or earbuds. At any time during the presentation, please feel free to drop any comments or questions into the chat bar. We will be monitoring that chat bar to make sure that we're addressing any of your needs. And finally, we all know in this virtual environment that technology can become a barrier. So if any time you are kicked off of the session, please feel free to join us again. And if you are find the LinkedIn information, if you go to my email or Colleen's, we have the link on our auto reply for our email, and you can enter into the work that way. On the bottom bar, you'll see where those controls are. Your mute is on the bottom bar as well as the chat bar. All right, so we're going to go ahead and continue. Thinking about our work in the spring and beginning to think about how our beginning of the school is going to look, we have a lot to consider. We have a lot of unknowns. Will we be going back face-to-face? Might we be in a hybrid situation or completely virtual? With those unknowns, we'd like to offer you this comfort. There's also always the literacy essentials that we back on, because best practice, though it might look different in a virtual environment, best practice is still our go-to. So let's talk about our outcomes for today. We have an hour, and these are the things that we're hoping to accomplish with you. First, we're going to go back into Essential 4 from the K-3 Essential Practices, Instructional Practices, and we are going to dive into Essential 4, specifically 3 of the bullets. We're going to review what do these practices look like face-to-face when we're in a classroom, these phonological awareness instructional practices. And then we're going to learn a little bit about how to engage in a virtual environment with these instructional practices. And then we'd like to give a chunk of time at the end for you to meet with your colleagues and share some successes you've had with phonological awareness practices and how might you convert those into a virtual space. Because we have an hour, Colleen and I are going to be doing quite a bit of talking, and thank you for granting us the grace to continue to give you the information. At the end, we'll give you some collaborative time with your participants. We wish we had more time with you, but we have a time constraint of an hour, so we want to make sure that we make this useful information and engaging. For your benefit, we have created a reflection guide, and Laura right now is dropping the tiny URL into the chat box, or you can use the one that is on the screen. The purpose of the reflection guide is really to get down any thoughts, any of your reflections, and if you're like me and you're attending multiple sessions during our summer blitz, this is an easy way to keep all of your thinking and your processing organized on one form. We invite you to use the form, but if you have another way of collecting and processing your thoughts, we welcome them. Actions are in order. Hi everyone, my name is Lou Strimble. I'm a literacy consultant for Wayne Risa. I have a passion for elementary education. I have been a literacy coach, a reading interventionist, and I have 24 years in education. I'm going to turn it over to my Colleen so she can introduce herself.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. We're happy to be here with you today. My name is Colleen Whalen. I'm one of the literacy consultants on our team at RISA. I've been here for 5 years, and prior to that, I worked in a district with a couple different roles. I guess I pride myself mostly on being a coach, working side by side in classrooms with teachers, and then also doing some consulting work on the side as well.
Thanks, Colleen. And we don't want to forget Dr. Laura Gabrion. She will be working our back channel. Laura, can you go ahead and unmute and introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, Laura Gabrian. I'm a literacy consultant at Wayne Risa, and I'll try to, the best of my ability, keep you up to speed by posting things in the chat. But if you have a question, don't hesitate to reach out to me through the chat. I'll get that answered to you as soon as I can.
It is truly a blessing to have Laura on the back channel for us, because in this environment, our team is rapidly understanding the complexity of a virtual environment. So we are so thrilled to have Laura with us today. We would like to start with a free resource that should be your starting point. When we think about essentials.org, we encourage whoever we are partnering with to really visit this website. It is a bevy of free resources, including online modules that have sample videos. There's a reflection guide. It is just jam-packed with resources that are research-based, so they are best practices. So if you haven't had an opportunity to visit literacyessential.org or put it as a bookmark like I have, we encourage you to do that. Most of what we're going over today originated from literacyessentials.org. So let's go ahead and get started.
So what we'd like to do is focus heavily today on that essential number 4, which is activities that build phonological awareness. That'll be our main focus. You'll notice just in the subprint there that grades K and 1 specifically, but oftentimes we notice that students in grades 2 and after who have reading difficulties may need support in this area as well. So as we briefly look at the bullets underneath essential number 4, we're going to notice that teachers promote phonological awareness development, particularly phonemic awareness development, through explicit explanation, demonstration, play with sounds and words, and engaged study of words, such as by listening to and creating variations on books and songs with rhyming and alliteration. And if your mind goes directly to a stellar kindergarten or first grade classroom, you would be hearing wonderful read-alouds, singing songs, all of the wonderful things that go along with playing with language and words. And that would be our hope for you in a classroom focusing heavily on phonological awareness. Something that comes to my mind is maybe a song like Down by the Bay or Apples and Bononos. You're playing aloud with language during this instructional time. The next bullet is sorting pictures, objects, or written words by a sound or sounds. So oftentimes we think about having kids do some sorting activities. Maybe it's with some pictures, or maybe you have some objects. We're always trying to consider what would it look like in a virtual setting? How fun might it be for children to get up from their seats and go in the kitchen and find some things that start with the letter J? But also we think of sorting as well as words too. So once we get to that further development in phonological awareness, we start to weave in some of the phonics and letter-sound relations, and that's where you would start to see similarities or differences with words and letters. The third bullet talks about activities involving segmenting sounds and words. And so oftentimes we go to that notion of using Elkonin boxes, where kids have a little token or a penny, and they might manipulate it upward as they hear the different phonemes in a word. So we will be showing you some spin-off ideas for that when we think about a remote setting today. Another activity to build phonological awareness would be including blending sounds and words. So oftentimes we think about segmenting and blending sounds together. For example, if you were to say the word fish, we might break that apart into 3 different phonemes. Fish. So that's another building activity when we think about phonological awareness. And then lastly, the last bullet mentions this notion of daily opportunities to write meaningful text, where kids are really listening to the sounds that they hear in words and they estimate their spellings. And so oftentimes when we're sitting side by side with students in a one-on-one conference or possibly in a small group writing group, we're thinking about segmenting and blending, thinking about isolating sounds and connecting that to the writing that they're performing. So one thing to mention, when we talk about the word phonological awareness, we really like to think of it as an umbrella. And what falls underneath that umbrella are numerous things. We think about phonological awareness is having the ability to pay conscious attention to the sounds that make up language. When we think about those sounds in language, we think about rhymes, we think about onset and rhymes, we think about syllables, and we can also consider phonemes. Why does phonological awareness matter? Well, it's one of the best predictors of reading achievement. We've heard this again and again from researchers and more even updated researchers. We know how important it is that phonological awareness is sound before kids achieve at higher standards in reading. Children with strong phonological awareness learn to read more easily and have a higher reading performance later on. It provides one of the building blocks for decoding. And to sound out words, children must first be able to identify and manipulate the sounds within words. That's a really interesting and key piece to the learning we're offering today. Before kids can start decoding and reading those words aloud, they first have to be able to identify, hear, manipulate the sounds within words. One thing we wanted to share with you today is a resource that we received at the state level. And there's actually a link that Laura will put into the chat, which actually gives you a different version of this, but one that we thought you would appreciate having. What we like best about this resource is how it shows a progression of playing with sounds and words, and what starts off as easy tasks and progresses on to a little bit harder tasks. In no way are we saying this is a linear thing that needs to be taught, but what we're saying is oftentimes students might find it easier to hear rhyming words. They might find it fairly easy to think about syllables and how many words would be in syllables. And you can go on and on. But really what we wanted to point out here is that it doesn't necessarily come in this linear progression. The ultimate goal is so that the kids have this phoneme level of awareness and understanding of those letters and sounds. One thing I like to remind people is that phonological awareness is entirely oral. It can be done in the dark. And so oftentimes as teachers, we seem to gravitate towards those visual things, the things we can touch and see and show. The wonderful thing about teaching phonological awareness is that it's all oral. And so really being mindful of spending that time in your learning, in the teaching of the sounds that make up our language.
So at this point, Laura, are there any questions in the chat that we need to address?
Colleen, one participant asked if you have the link to that chart that you showed on slide 17.
Yes, we do. What we gave in the chat was actually another chart that looked kind of like it, but it had more ideas for different tasks that you might choose. But we can certainly add another link to the resources that you can get later on when the presentation is recorded.
All right. Laura, are there any questions that we need to address?
No, that was the only question right now.
Okay, thank you. Quickly, I want to refer back to what Colleen just said about at the end of our session. I forgot to mention this. We are offering an additional voluntary half hour to join us for the planning of this professional learning. So if you are part of a a literacy leadership team, such as a coach or a lead teacher, and you would like some of our resources or like us to be a thought partner as you plan around the topic of phonemic awareness or phonological awareness, please join us. It's going to be from 4 to 4:30 and it's voluntary. We wanted to make sure we mentioned. So thinking about that developmental progression and the tasks that are associated with it, we want to slow down and look at all of the various tasks. And what does that look like in a face-to-face environment? And then what might that look like as we work in a virtual environment? So let's look at the first task, matching. And as I think about this task, I think about myself at a kidney table with 3 of my kiddos in front of me and talking about a lesson we had been doing on rhyme and rhyming words. And I think to myself, if I'm in a face-to-face, those students might possibly have plexiglass in front of them, or they might be farther distance from me. So, or if I'm in a virtual environment, I have to rethink those instructional practices. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this through the lens of a virtual environment. So let's say that because I'm not at my kidney table, I could possibly use the function of poll within Zoom, which is the platform we're working with right now. So what I would do is I would tell my kiddos, take a look at the visual on the screen. Do you notice this word right here? This is yes. And notice it has this symbol, that thumbs up. If you see the thumbs up and the word yes, that means you agree or you are going to answer yes to a question that I pose to you. And then I would go ahead and explain the same thing to them for the no. So I am going to ask you to be my students. And in a moment, I am going to take you through what this would look like in a virtual environment using a Zoom poll. All right, here we go. Hello, boys and girls. Do you remember when we talked about rhyming words and how sometimes they can sound the same? What I'd like to do for you is I want to remind you of how we answer questions using yes or no. We talked about this yesterday. So I'm going to ask you a question and I want you to use the poll that's on your screen right now. And here's your question. Do the words mat and cat rhyme? Go ahead and click either yes or no. Okay, what is beautiful about these polls are they are anonymous. You will not see which students are answering, so you don't have to worry about a student getting a wrong answer. And Laura just relaunched the poll. So what we also notice is it gives me, I can see a percentage of the students who have answered the poll, and I can close the poll when I have all 105 participants have answered the poll. And it also gives me a percentage of the students who answered yes and a percentage that answered no. So right now the poll has closed and 100% have answered yes. Those 2 words rhyme. So what I can do is then I can share the results if it's 100% as a celebration. Look, we all were able to identify. I would not share the poll, however, if it wasn't 100%, because I don't want any of my kiddos feeling bad if they didn't select the right answer. So you can use that with matching as far as rhyming, but let's how you can do that with beginning sounds. So here is your next questions. All right, boys and girls, I have another question. So remember, when the poll pops up, answer yes or no. Do fish and dish start with the same sounds? Laura, can you, there we go. Does fish and dish start with the same sound? And you notice there is a timer in the corner of my poll. It tells me how long the poll has been up. Sometimes we want to keep an eye on that timer and the number of students that have participated to give them more than enough time to respond. You can use a poll in a small group setting. If you're doing a whole class lesson, you could use a poll. And we're going to go ahead and end that poll. And I can see the results. 91% of my kiddos said no, and 9% said yes. So if I'm thinking about that tier 1 instruction, I want 80 to 90% of my kids to be able to identify those same sounds at the beginning. But I know that 9% and 8 of my kids weren't able to do that. So that might make me then continue with my formative assessment on those students who aren't able to identify that sound, or it might be my practice. If I'm recording the session, I might stop myself and say, I didn't put enough emphasis on those beginning sounds, so I need to redo that as well. Okay, we're going to end this poll. Another way you can do this is simply, if you've got a small group and you have all your tiles, your gallery view, you can ask your kids, do fish and dish start with the same sound? Give me a high five if your answer is yes. If you're no, don't give me any signal at all. Or you can use your thumbs up or thumbs down instead of the poll. So you can go low tech as well. Let's move on to isolation, the next task. So when we want sounds, we want our students to really isolate sounds, we have another option virtually. Dr. Nell Duke just created a video in May. I hope if you have not had a chance to view the whole video, we are going to drop that video link in the chat for you. But I'd like to show you a segment of the video where she is talking about isolating the sound oi, and she gives multiple ways to do that. So we're going to go ahead and watch that. As you're watching it, what virtual moves or how does she engage her students during this lesson?
First, let's just see if you can say that sound. Ruth, can you say oi for us?
Oi.
That's right. Mila?
Oi.
Shannon?
Oi.
And Annie.
Oi.
So you've all got that oi sound. You're all able to say that sound, and now we're going to try to hear that sound inside some words. So one of the things we want to really emphasize in teaching small group reading instruction online is having kids engaged in active responding. So I'm going to show you a couple of different ways that students could respond actively while listening for the oi sound in words. So one technique we can use is polling. I'll use that for my first example. Okay, so the first word I'm going to say is soil. Say soil to yourselves. Soil. And then I want you to think about whether you hear the oi sound in soil. I've got a poll up on the screen. If you hear oi in soil, then say yes. And if you don't hear oi in soil, say no. If you're not sure, say I'm not sure. So go ahead and respond to the poll now. Okay, and so as a teacher, I'm able to see that 3 of the 4 students thought they heard the oi sound in soil, but 1 did not. Now, one disadvantage of polling is that I can't see who didn't hear oi in soil, and sometimes that's okay, but at other times that's not ideal. So I'm going to show you another way of responding for our next example, which is the word pot. Okay, so for this example, I'm going to have the participants frame open on Zoom. And so with that participants frame there, you'll see that near the bottom, there's some options. Yes, no, go slower, go faster, more. And the more gives you a few key things you might want to know about for your more advanced Zoom users. A thumbs up, a thumbs down, a clap, and then need a break. So if children feel like they need a break, they would click that little coffee pot there, and then away. If for some reason someone has to step away, they can click that. But for our purposes, in terms of listening for the oi sound in pot, I'm just going to have the kids click yes or no. So you'll hear me demonstrate that now. Okay, the next word is pot. Do do you hear the oi sound in pot? Click yes if you hear the oi sound and no if you don't hear the oi sound in pot. Pot. So Mila does not hear the oi sound in pot, as you can see on our screen. One of the reasons I like this responding format is because it does allow me to know which students are or are not getting whatever it is that I'm going over. And so that's an advantage of this particular responding format. So thanks very much for helping me demonstrate that, coaches. I'm going to show you one more responding format. And for this one, I can close out my participants window. Or keep it open, doesn't really matter. But down at the bottom of the Zoom screen, you'll see a button that says Reactions. And you can teach students to use the Reactions button as another way of responding depending on what you're teaching or asking about. So in this case, I might say, okay, so for the next word is oink, oink. Can you give a thumbs up on your reaction button if you hear the oi in oink? Okay, thank you. And so viewers at home, you can see that that tells me that Ruth, Shannon, and Mila hear an oi and oink, and Annie does not hear an oi and oink.
So what we'd like to do now is just take a moment, and if you could, please, in the chat box, could you lift one of those virtual moves that you think might help when you're doing your virtual instructional practices? Just go ahead and drop it into the chat link or the chat box. We'll give you a minute to do that. So just one practice that you watched on the video that you would like to try or really resonated with you.
Mary Lou and Colleen, we're getting a lot on the polling and the reactions.
Wonderful. So thinking around that you have many options, we want to make sure that we're cautious that we don't overload our kids with too many of these protocols. So a consistency, making sure that you teach the students how to use that. You saw that with Nell when she asked them to go ahead and use the reaction button. You're going to want to do that and have the students practice with that before you actually implement it. So lots of wonderful ideas there. The next awareness task that we'd like to talk to you about is blending.
Thanks, Mary Lou, for sharing the information on isolation and that little blurb. Just another way to reiterate what Mary Lou mentioned about overloading kids with too many different options. We know best, kindergarten and first grade teachers, most primary ed teachers are excellent at teaching routines and structures, and the same would hold true for a virtual setting. So you know how slow we take things when we're teaching kids at the beginning of school. The same thing would apply in these virtual settings as well. So just as a nice reminder, it's good to have these tools in our toolbox, and when something seems to be getting a little old, it's great to try something new, but we want to stay as consistent as possible. So again, when we think about these phonological awareness tasks, we've talked about matching, right? We've talked a little bit about isolation, and now we're into blending. So really thinking about putting sounds together to create words, maybe multi-syllabic words, or maybe just one-syllable words. So be thinking in your mind about how to help children blend sounds together. And so you might say something like cow, boy. Put those two sounds together, and then you have cowboy. But you might even have something as simple as spoon, spoon. Now put those sounds together. We're going to show you just a small little clip from this video, which of course you can see is from our K3 Essentials modules. we thought this would be a nice way to show blending sounds and words. I think it's just a 4-minute clip.
Activities that involve blending sounds and words help children to build phonemic awareness. In this classroom, the teacher uses a puppet to segment words, and the children are learning to blend the sounds in order to figure out which word the puppet is saying.
For Robot Frog, we're going to do something that all pre-K students love. We're going to use puppets. And this puppet's going to be kind of unusual because he's a robot frog. So instead of saying words the way we do conventionally, he'll use sound segments. And their job will be to blend the sounds to figure out what word Robot Frog wants.
I have someone in my hand. You might know who he is. I have a frog in my hand.
A robot
But
frog.
it's a robot frog. And you know it's a robot frog because he has the letter R. Say, hi, robot frog.
Hi, robot frog.
Hi, robot frog. Hi, Quentin. Hi, Ava. What was your name?
Brooklyn.
Hi, Brooklyn. And what was your name? I think we have a similar name.
Fabian.
Oh, you're Fabian. I like the letter F a lot, too, because I'm a frog. Well, the funny thing about Robot Frog, he doesn't talk the way we do. He makes his words into sounds. So sometimes it's hard to understand Robot Frog, and we have to help figure out what he wants.
One of the things that's so important for pre-K literacy is that they have good phonological awareness. So it was really intentional that I did this with the letter sounds.
I'm going to pause. We'll let him rest for a minute. What is this?
Cow.
We'll have to remember that's a cow.
Bee. Ah! Don't touch it. It's gonna sting you.
Oh, I'll be careful. Thank you.
He's touching me. Sting you. Don't egg.
What is
Don't
that?
make it. Don't make your hands get messy with
I'll
the
try.
egg.
I'll be careful with that egg.
I'll
Like a
eat
messy
that.
scrambled egg.
All
All right, this one's not messy. What's that? The key?
You unlock your door, you fit.
And we were talking about animals live in a lot of places. This time they live in a zoo. Let's say all the pictures one more time. Key, cow, egg, bee, and zoo. Now we have to help Mr. Robot Frog because he'll want something.
In pre-K, the way I look at phonological awareness is hearing the sounds and words, and that's really important. So we might do a lot of songs where they do the sounds in their names or sounds in poems that they know, and that's really important before you learn how to read and write, that you have that down.
Robot Frog would like a ow.
Cow.
Thank you.
I want to put it in his mouth. Yum, yum, yum.
Oh, E. Thank you. Let's do a different one. Let's do Z. Ooh. You read Robot Frog's mind. Are you ready? Robot Frog wants a g. Like, thank you.
Pre-K students this year really like puppets, and they really like to be silly. So Robot Frog was a way to have them blend the sounds together to make words.
Let's go back to the cards. He wants a bus.
Bass.
Thank you.
He took it.
This time, Robot Frog wants something different. He wants a Thank you.
I'm good at this.
You are good, but let's let them have a turn too. Let's try a different sound. Let's do at. Thank you.
We make it really fun and playful in pre-K because it's more meaningful and it's more engaging, and they just pick it up faster than if it's silly and fun.
It's time to say goodbye to Robot Frog.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Fabian. Bye, Brooklyn. Bye, Quentin. Bye, Ava. Bye-bye.
Learn more at literacyessentials.org.
So that was just a nice little blurb to see what it might look like if you were doing an activity or a task around blending sounds. Another task that you might consider is segmentation. So really listening to the whole word and then being able to take that apart. So tell me the parts you hear in the word table. And we would want kids to be able to segment that word table out. Table. So oftentimes we associate this task with the Elkonin boxes. And so, Mary Lou, if you would just skip to the next slide there, we know that Elkonin sound boxes really help to differentiate the sounds in words and the speech that goes with those sounds in words. So we teach kids to be able to manipulate each sound in a word. And it's nice sometimes for children to have something to hold on to. That's why sometimes you'll see someone maybe point to a token or push up a token or a penny of sorts. Sometimes you can simply have them touch the box to say the sounds. As time goes by and the kids are getting more comfortable with the sounds that they hear, you start to then associate the letter with the sound, and you can start to put letters in those sound boxes. But remember, today we're specifically focusing on phonological awareness. So it's all of the sounds that we're hearing, not necessarily the letters that are connected to it right now.
So to the question of how do we make this work in a virtual environment? And one suggestion we have is if you are a member of Google Suites or you have a G Suite, that you might be able to utilize Jamboard. What you need to do to access Jamboard, it is part of your Google Suite, is you go up to your waffle, click on your waffle, and you're going to want to scroll. As you can see from my bar, it's almost at the very bottom of the list. Click on Jamboard. And when you get to Jamboard, you'll see something like this. It will invite you to create templates that you can use. And we, Colleen and myself, we started playing around with this, and we're very excited that using this feature, this Jamboard, you can actually make Elkonin boxes. You can share the link with one student, and then to then move the Post-it notes into the box as you're saying it. So Colleen, I'm going to have you go ahead and say the word, and then I'll be your student. Oh, you're muted, Colleen.
The word is bat. What do you hear at the beginning of bat? What do you hear in the middle of bat? And what do you hear at the end of bat?
So it's an effective tool, one-on-one with students, to help them demonstrate that they are identifying those phonemes in the words. We also can use this of the more of the consonant, consonant, vowel, consonant formats. Even when we're looking at the diagraphs. Thank you for that. I lost the diagraph work that we know that we have to use with our kids farther down the developmental progression. And then finally, traditional Elkonin boxes where they can actually just move the disc when they hear the sound. Now, something that we learned as Colleen and I were exploring this tool, at the top you'll see in the bar, our URL bar, that each time I change the slide, there is a new number. So I would have to share that link to each of these new slides in the chat box for my students to use. So I can privately send this link to one of my students, and I can name them and say, Colleen, in the chat box, could you click on the link? Now that link would only go to Colleen. And of course, I'm going to have to make sure that's one of the protocols, one of my norms, that my students know how to access the chat. That would be her opportunity in a small group to show her understanding. Are there any questions in the chat box, Laura, about Jamboard? We will also go over that during our planning for professional learning at the end. But are there any questions right now?
The only one was about using it for more than one student. And definitely you can use it with a group of students. But then I think you answered the question about how to share the link to the Jamboard with the students. If anyone else has any other questions. One other question was, how can you see what the student is doing?
So the understanding is, we're going to attack that last question. When you're sharing your screen and you share that link with your student, they are interacting with the platform and you're able to see it on your screen. And all the other kids that are in the small group can see it as well. We have yet to work out an easy way for our little ones to have access so that they can make a copy. It would be difficult to have more than one student on the board at a time. But if you have a workaround around that, please contact us and let us know. We are still exploring all of these new platforms in a virtual environment. So please reach out and let us know. Our last awareness task, when we think about deletions or substitution, we look at when we ask a student, if I say the word napkin without kin, what word would you have? And we want our students to be able to take the end of that word off, see those two segments, and be able to say nap. So a really nice platform that we have used is called Pear Deck, and Laura is dropping the link in for Pear Deck. They have a free Pear Deck option right now. Caution, we're not sure how long this is going to last. We think it's until the end of September, but they might push it forward into the school year. The slide you're seeing right now are already pre-populated lessons available on Pear Deck. I've already created them. You can also buy a subscription if you would like to create your own lessons, but these populated lessons are available on Pear Deck right now. And we think about on that progression, we usually begin with kids with their beginning sounds, identifying those. Then we move to the end sounds, and then we move to those middle sounds. And usually that CVC, the vowel sounds, are a little bit more complicated. So having a visual like this can help our kids. So,
Mary Lou?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, but just as a quick caution, something actually Mary Lou and I learned about today in a session that we were a part of is to make sure that the tool doesn't drive the work we're doing. We really want to know what are we trying to find out about kids? What learning needs to happen? Where do they need to go next? So even though we're sharing a lot of ideas for tools, we want you to make sure that you're using the tool that is best to find out the information that you're looking for. We all get excited about a new tool and, oh, I think the kids will love that. But we do have to be cautious about the assessments that we are giving our kids and making sure that it's exactly the information we need.
It's so important that you lifted it. Thank you, Colleen, because we can overdo it with our kids. We want to make sure that we're consistent in the tools that we're using and that we use them and the kids are comfortable with the protocols. So this is a time in our session that we'd like you to get with your colleagues and talk about what are some phonological activities that you use that have been successful. How might you move those successes to a remote environment? And then when we think about your phonological awareness ideas, what ones might you be willing to share with colleagues? So we're going to go into a breakout room for 10 minutes and give you a time to really just chat with some colleagues. In a moment, Laura will set up the breakout rooms and invite you. Enjoy your time together.
Thank you for participating in those breakout sessions. We find from our participants again and again that they really appreciate that time just to chat and learn from one another and make those connections. So our time is up. It goes so quickly. Surprisingly, it goes so quickly. But what we'd love to invite you to do is to give us some feedback. What did you think about this last hour of learning? What was helpful? What things could we improve upon? What else do you need to hear from us? You can quickly hop on that tiny URL, or if you have the QR reader on your phone, you can simply snap a picture of that QR code. We'd love to hear your feedback as we continue trying to support you as much as we can as we begin this back to school. If you are interested in hanging out for a little while, we are going to offer just a little extra time. If you are someone that's responsible for facilitating professional development, if there were any technical tips that you needed extra support on, if you had questions that were unanswered and we weren't able to get to, we invite you to stay on. Otherwise, we wish you well. We hope to see you at another Summer Blitz session and wish you a happy start to your school year. Thanks so much, everyone.
And I want to add one more thing. We are recording this session, so if this seemed like a lot of information and you would like to view this session again, it will be recorded and you'll find it on lln.risa.net. Thanks, everyone. We hope you stay with us for Planning for Professional Learning.